Bryce Peterson. I am a sophomore here at BYU. I'm studying advertising and I like sports.
What's your name?
My name's Aaron Foley.
Okay.
Should I redo that question?
Okay, what's your name?
I'm Aaron.
I'm Ainsley Farmer. I'm an English major here at BYU, and I'm a junior.
My name is Evelyn Torres Bell. I grew up a member of the church, but I had a really cool, unique experience because my parents were divorced. So I had one household that had the gospel and one household that didn't. And it was really cool to feel that difference because I was loved in both, but definitely the Spirit made a huge difference in my life when I was able to have that experience. I'm from Laie, Hawaii. I served a mission in San Antonio, Texas. I'm studying theater education here at BYU, and I got married in December.
My name's Audrey, and I am a theater education major here at BYU. I served in Tucson, Arizona, and I am a Spanish-speaking dual language immersion teaching minor.
My name is Ben Fairborn. I go to BYU. I served a mission in Tucson, Arizona. I'm studying psychology. I want to go into social work to help people with addiction recovery.
First one that jumps to mind is probably Prince of Egypt. I absolutely love that movie because it characterizes and humanizes a lot of the characters.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of theater in my time, and so I'm familiar with ones that are both directly about Bible stories and ones that are more about spirituality in general. I've seen a couple of different productions of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and that's probably my favorite Bible story directly. It brings this fresh lens to the story because a lot of Old Testament stories especially feel really dated and old and not very relatable. But by introducing the humor and the brightness and the liveliness of performance and the variety, it feels a lot more accessible and entertaining and even relatable.
I grew up watching shows like Prince of Egypt and stuff, which were incredible, and as a child just absolutely loved it. And then there's things like VeggieTales where it just as a kid you just really latch onto it. It helps you understand it so much better. And then I've also watched some that were really bad and made me feel super uncomfortable just because of the way they portrayed Jesus Christ or just different elements. It's like, wait, that's not what I was taught, and it just kind of made me feel super uncomfortable. So I think it definitely depends on the show, and then also the production, like how it's done. What comes to mind is Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I actually don't like the Donny Osmond version. No shade against him, but watching it, I feel like it's overly sexualized in a lot of different ways, and they don't even really mention God. But BYU Hawaii put on a version of Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, and they killed it. I remember watching it and actually feeling the Spirit so much.
I've seen a few. I've watched The Chosen extensively. I've seen The Prince of Egypt. That's one of my favorites. Whenever I watch something like that, what sticks out most is how faithful they are to the actual story that's written. And so it's important to me to know where they take creative liberties so that I don't have a kind of a false image of the actual story based on what someone might have interpolated based on their own understanding. So obviously with The Prince of Egypt, Moses probably didn't sing as much, but it's kind of logical the direction they took with it. The Chosen is a little less so, but they still do a really good job. So I just noticed how it lines up with the actual written story.
I think of The Prince of Egypt, how the people received the miracles, how they were affected a lot more because you could see their reactions.
I watched the production of Godspell that they did here. The way that they portrayed Jesus was just so interesting because he was playful, really different perspective that I feel you don't really get just from studying the scriptures. And it just changed the way I thought about my relationship with Jesus Christ.
Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat makes trusting God sound really fun and cool.
The most prominent one right now, probably if we're talking about Christianity, I think The Chosen is definitely the most popular by far among all sects of Christianity. They switch between a low and high Christology, and so I think it's very relatable for most people, and I think that really helps kind of make it more watchable for like the common person, even if they're not like super into the Bible stories. Being able to see Jesus smile, laugh, and tell jokes is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I actually recently went and saw The Prince of Egypt at Hale Center Theater, and I think that's a great example of a biblical story told well and done right, because I highly doubt that Moses and Ramses broke out into harmonies, while they were fighting each other, but the spirit that was created while watching this production helps to like humanize these characters. I really appreciate that in the play version of The Prince of Egypt, Ramses has a whole like character arc, story development, whereas like we don't get that in the movie, and we definitely don't get that in the scriptures.
Like the way that they're portrayed, like the way Christ is portrayed sometimes, like people can be really upset and offended very easily by people trying to make Jesus Christ more like playful and like fit in with other people and stuff. But I feel like in modern media, when he is portrayed in a way that is more like different than what you expect, it can also be helpful with just being able to like relate to him and stuff. Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest advantages that they have is applying things that were written thousands of years ago to today's circumstances. I feel like Jonah and the Whale, the VeggieTales movie, is a great example of that, of like, it's still the same Bible story, but it's portrayed in a way that kids and people today will understand a lot better.
Absolutely. I'm not as familiar with Jesus Christ Superstar, but the version that I've seen of it takes the story of the Passion of Christ and the crucifixion and puts it into this rock setting. And it feels very modern and it feels very relevant, and it's saying that, okay, maybe this particular event of this story happened 2,000 years ago, but you're still seeing similar things today with people that are protesting or trying to advocate for human rights or that sort of thing, that are punished and are suffering, even though they're really trying to help make the world a better place. And by reimagining the setting, it makes Christ's purpose more clear and more universal and more relevant, absolutely.
I think the most inspiring film would probably be The Prince of Egypt. I think that the music is what really brings it all together for me.
There can be miracles when you believe.
When you read a story, right, you have an idea of how things might be, but I think seeing someone else's interpretation of that, especially, well, what's important to me is especially when it's faithful to the text, something like that I think has a lot of potential to be moving and faith building even. So yeah, I think I have been, definitely, and seeing the expression on people's faces, whether it's like animated or like actual live action, that has a lot of potential, I think, for people and for me. So
I have had my ebbs and flows in my spirituality, and so there's been times where I only really can feel the Spirit through performance, and I've felt it to some degree in ones that are straight up adaptations of biblical stories. I've felt it more with Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat than with some others, but I also think of stories that are maybe not directly adapting Bible stories, but are directly adapting spiritual themes. I feel the Spirit more in Les Mis than I do in most church settings. It allows me to see the messiness of humanity and the fact that no matter how messy you are, Jean Valjean is in a very complicated position in that story, but he becomes this almost Christ figure.
I remember in second grade, I don't know if I would call this spiritually moved, but in second grade, I remember seeing this Easter production that was done not by people in our faith, and so they like really highlighted Jesus Christ's death, and like he came out like with a cross covered in blood and like walked through the audience. And I remember being like, as a second grader, being like, he's like dying, like actually dying. And I had to like remind myself that it was just a play and that I could see him like holding the bars, and like I had to look for that and be like, no, it's not stabbed into his hands, like it's okay.
I think that I'm not alone in this. I think that there's a lot of people that can connect with it. I know I have plenty of friends that love like the soundtracks and stuff to these movies, and even if they're not necessarily religious, I still think it's something that it's a good story all by itself, even without the religious connotations and things like that. Like it's still a story that I would watch if I didn't believe in God. Even if you don't necessarily believe in it, it's still something that can be inspiring and can be captivating as well.
I know for a fact that I'm not alone in feeling this way, or else we wouldn't have these shows that exist. And there's always such large audiences in these. I've been to several different performances of theater, of specifically religious theater, and based on the size of the audience, there's definitely a desire for these theatrical interpretations of Bible stories, or else Andrew Lloyd Webber wouldn't have been so successful.
I think that giving a new perspective is the biggest part of it, because every time that a story is retold, whoever's retelling it adds a little bit of their own ideas and their own understanding of it. And when I go back and like reread the scriptures or whatever, I'll find something new the second time or the third time I read it. And so it's the same thing when you're retelling a story. When you hear it from someone else, even if it's the same story you've heard a million times, then that person telling it might add something new, or might emphasize or not emphasize things that change the whole way you view the movie or the story.
Yes. Back to Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I definitely was not expecting like the 70s ballads and the Elvis adaptation, and I was not expecting all of that. It made me think of it more as a party than like a tragic story of betrayal and loss. I don't think it's disrespectful, it's just different.
I think just growing up, viewing things like VeggieTales or just like Technicolor Code Dreams or Prince of Egypt, things like that, all these different movies, even some of like the random animations or things like that, or like short films about Christ. I feel like all of that has just slowly increased my understanding and broadened my horizons of who Christ is and what he's done for me. And so I would say that yes, like all these different things, they've all contributed just a little bit to my testimony and to my understanding of God and who he is. Moses, he went through a lot. You get to see a lot of the struggle and the internal battle that you might not necessarily see just with written accounts in the Bible. You get to see that how his relationship was with his family, with the people around him, the worries and the nervousness he had. And so things like that really help to humanize the prophets and allow me to relate more to them. And so I can compare my own struggles and my own experiences with the things that they went through as well. So I feel like that really helps me understand biblical stories and God's love a lot more.
I feel like the performances that I've definitely, first of all, yeah, I've definitely seen productions change me and help me understand Christ better, even if it's not explicitly about Jesus, just because of his example and what he stands for, and then seeing that through a human lens kind of like separates it in such a way that it's attainable for me.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, with Godspell, like I remember coming out and feeling way different about how I felt about Jesus Christ and how I looked at him. And then just like little moments of like watching movies of like God is not dead, is that what it's called? I don't remember. But like those films, they always make you feel like so good after you're watching them, and you're like, wow.
Lamb of God, it's a lot more of a traditional way to tell it, but you know, it's like very much reimagined. It's all musical, you know, like Christ is portrayed through a cello and all that. I think just being able to see like the points that are made in the scriptures from different angles just will never not provide provide an opportunity for the Spirit to teach you something different. And see God is a lot more present and powerful when I watch stuff like The Prince of Egypt. Reimagined is cool. Like even like VeggieTales, man. Like that stuff was really helpful for kids, for me.
I'm an English major, so I definitely understand the importance of the spoken word, but there's also something about performance that lets you engage with something on a more personal level. And I think about situations like Shakespeare where you can read it as literature, but it's meant to be performed, and you can only really understand what's going on when something is performed and you can see it and you can interact with it in some way. And by adapting the spoken word, the written word of scripture into a performance setting, you're accessing that rich history. And a lot of the stories in the Bible were originally told as oral history, and they weren't written down until much, much later. And so by taking the Bible, which is a written adaptation of a spoken story, and adding back in the spoken aspects, the performative aspects, you're tapping into a rich, rich history.
In my experience watching things where they modernize the gospel, like Godspell or Jesus Christ Superstar, I feel a super disconnect between actual spirituality and the content I'm watching. But again, bringing it back to childhood, watching things like VeggieTales, where it was gospel principles taught by a talking vegetable, it was super applicable and helpful and stuff. And I know that there are tons of people who love Godspell and Jesus Christ Superstar, and it does help them to connect to it, but me personally, it doesn't. Actually, I feel shows that focus more on like the spirit rather than like the content being gospel, I guess, like Les Mis, for example, so many huge gospel principles in that I feel like are super applicable to today, and like because it's entertaining, people are more open-minded to it. There's so many people that I feel like don't, even if you don't like Jesus, you would love Les Mis, and then those principles help you understand the gospel better.
I definitely like it when they're reimagined. I feel like, I don't know, but that's also probably because I'm a theater major, and so like that's my whole life, is retelling stories and telling them in a different way. So I feel like the same thing should be happening with Christ. And it's not like changing who he is, like you stick to the script, but you just look at it from a new perspective. You know?
There's a scene there's an episode in The Chosen where Peter is, it's the scene where he's like, Jesus, how many times should I forgive someone? And then Jesus says like, as many as it takes. And that stood out to me, and I think I could relate with that, because I think it's easy for us and myself to kind of say like, to kind of point fingers like this person did this, or like this person's bad, but I mean, like, something we have to do is kind of point the finger at ourselves sometimes. I'm not in an accusatory way, but saying, okay, well, I've done probably something similar. And so, I mean, I think the point of the story is that you have done something similar, and that kind of makes you realize, well, then maybe I would want someone to move on from my mistake. I should move on from someone else's. So
Sometimes people exist only in one verse or one chapter, and you don't get to fully understand who they were, why they did what they did. Something I've learned is that no one really thinks they're a villain. No one truly believes that what they're doing is wrong and tries to keep going forward with it. And so to look at characters like Pharaoh and to humanize him in a way that, yeah, is fictional. We don't really know what was going on through his head when Moses came to him and everything. All we know is that he rejected him and said that he wasn't going to let the people go. But being able to humanize him and understand that there had to have been more depth there, is really, really empowering. I think not just for understanding the scriptures, but understanding the world around us more.
I feel like seeing other people, like movies about Jesus Christ are great, but like with God is Not Dead and those other films, seeing people who are going through circumstances like mine and choosing to have faith is just so motivating to like feel like, wow, I'm not alone.
Probably Justice and Mercy. Maybe that's just because Les Mis is on my mind, but seeing people be merciful in productions is really, really moving. Whether that's, you know, Christine having pity on the Phantom, or Jean Valjean's entire character. Like, mercy, I feel like, is something that in the gospel we talk often about because it's one of Christ's main attributes, but it's actually a hard thing to do, especially when you yourself have been wronged. So seeing that mercy in productions, I feel like, is really, really moving. When musical pieces will play a theme that calls back to an earlier moment, but now it's changed. Now the characters have changed. Now their hearts are softer, or they're forgiving, or they're, you know, changing something to do right rather than, you know, to fix their mistakes. That for me has helped me see like repentance, I guess, which is the whole reason that we're all here.